So, this story is called Adam and the Dragon's Nest. My main characters are me, Adam Warren, Randy Warren, who was 13, Jason Warren, who was 16, Justin Warren, who was 19, my dad, who I refer to as father, and Officer Jim, who is my father's friend. So this is The Dragon's Nest by Adam Warren. My brothers and I never really got into trouble. There was a few times when we got into massive trouble, like when we burnt my father's shop down, or the time when I thought the sign above the candy bars said free, not buy one get two free, and I ended up going home with a backpack full of candy bars. The few times we did get in trouble, they were big deals. They weren't like anything small. But those are different stories for a different day. My dad would always tell us about his years in the Army, getting us ready for our years of joining the Army. It's kind of a family tradition. He would always tell us, son, in the Army, just know crap always runs downhill. Now that's not the word he used, but just for the sake of my integrity and the severity of the story, we're just going to go with that. So, I learned two fundamental facts growing up as a little brother. My first one was that crap always runs downhill. No matter where I was, I could be on the other side of the world. If my siblings did something, I was somehow involved and somehow it was my fault. So that brings me to my story. It was a sunny day. The clouds were, there were big poofy clouds in the sky. It was warm. On days like this, my brother Randy and I, we would go down to 7-Eleven, get some cream soda and some candy, and go down to the canyon and catch lizards. But this day, it was special, and it didn't happen very often. Justin and Jason didn't have school, so they came with us. So me and Randy took them down to our favorite lizard catching spot. But something really weird happened when we got there. They just kind of kept walking. I kind of looked at them, and I looked up at the rocks and thought of all the lizards I could be catching. The prospect of having them to myself was just overwhelming. But once again, my father's words, they rang in my head. He used to always tell us, son, you never leave a brother behind. Now, I didn't realize that perhaps, being the youngest, that they should have thought of this, but nonetheless, I chased after them, and before long, we were standing before this huge, jagged canyon wall, and on the very top was a cave. Randy looked at me and he said, see that cave up there, Adam? Up in that cave is a huge lizard. We're going to climb up this canyon wall, and we're going to get that lizard. Now, the idea of a huge lizard made me think of a dragon, and being from a family that's descended from knights, my imagination just took off. I started thinking of dragons and knights, and I was 6, so it kind of makes sense. But once again, my dad's words rang in my head. Dad always told us never to climb the canyon wall any higher than we were tall. So I told my brothers this, and I begged with them. I was like, we can't do this. This is a horrible idea. But my brothers can be very persuasive, and before long, I was getting ready to climb up this wall. I was under the impression that I would be last, and it wouldn't be a huge deal, but they made me go first. I remember Randy looking at me and saying, Adam, you're the lightest, you're the smallest, so you should go first. I just kind of looked at him, my jaw was dropped, I was, what? But they once again persuaded me, and so I started climbing. About 20 feet, it was really easy. You could tell people had done it before, but after that, it started getting really tricky. And after about 20 feet of cliffhanger-type climbing, I finally came up to the point where I could pull myself up to this giant cave. Once I got up there, I looked down and I realized how far up we were, and then I also realized how stupid this idea was. But nonetheless, I was up there, I was all excited, and I turned around and I looked into this cave expecting to see two big red eyes looking at me. But it was just a big empty cave, sadly. But I was convinced that there was going to be a dragon in that cave. So I stepped a little bit closer, my heart started to pump, I was getting really excited. I remember thinking to myself how cool it would be to kill a dragon by myself. I grabbed this huge stick that I found, I got a little bit closer, I got to the cave, I stepped inside, it smelled disgusting. There had to have been a dragon in that cave, it smelled so gross. I got a little bit closer, I stepped inside, it was wet, it was dark. I remember squinting my eyes to see if I could see a dragon or anything in this cave, and all of a sudden there's this huge, deafening roar. Never heard a sound like it before. I remember I turned around yelling, "Dragon!" and just ran. I just ran out of that cave as fast as I could, just to find out that half the canyon wall had collapsed, barely missing Randy, who was pulling himself up to where I was, and Justin and Jason. But later we found out that a giant rock had pinned my brother's hand. So trying to get out of there before somebody realized that we had single-handedly broken a canyon wall, we climbed down to try to help Justin and got the rock off his hand, and we were on our way down when we heard a sound that echoes in my mind even today. Freeze right there. And we turned around, and there was this man named Officer Jim. Now, it wasn't a big deal that an officer had found us and what we had done. The big deal was that this officer came to my father's house every Tuesday for a weekly poker game. So it wasn't long till my father was coming down that path with hell on his face. The looks on my brother's face was like they had seen a giant, blood-thirsty, man-eating, red-eyed dragon. So my father and the officer exchanged words, and before long, we were walking back up to my dad's truck. Not a word was said on the walk up there, or when we got home, the only thing my dad said was for us to go to our rooms. I can remember laying in my bed with the anticipation of what was going on. My dad's bedroom was right above mine, and before long I realized that my dad was calling us up individually, one at a time, talking to us. So I remember I was staring at the ceiling, and I closed my eyes, straining my ears to hear what, they could possibly be talking about. And then just laying there, my mind took off, and I was thinking about everything that happened, trying to recall what could have possibly made that wall of rocks fall. It covered the path we were on, it knocked over trees. It was a huge landslide that we had caused, and just trying to think of how, we could have possibly caused such a catastrophe. Not too long after that, as I was spacing out, my dad opened my door and told me to come upstairs, and so I marched behind my dad, as I always did, and we went upstairs. But it was really weird. Whenever we were in trouble, we would never go to my dad's bedroom like he would my brother's. We would always go on the porch in the backyard. I don't know why, it was just one of those things. And so he sat down, which was really weird that he asked me to sit down. Most of the time we had to stand at attention when we were in trouble. It's just kind of a military thing, military family. And so I stood there, and he asked me to sit down, and he asked me everything, tell him everything. So I did. The verbal vomit just spilled out of me. I told him from everything from what I got at 7-Eleven to showing Justin and Jason our favorite lizard spot and them not wanting to go there, climbing and them having me go there first. And I remember when I said that they asked me to go first and that I was the first one up there, he leaned forward and looked at me really intently and asked me to wait there, and he went inside. And before long, my brothers had come out, and they were looking really guilty, really horrified and upset. And I just thought it was because we just destroyed a canyon wall, but later on I found out why. So whenever something really huge happened, if we had company, like Dad's boss came over, or we were in huge trouble or whatever, we stood at attention, typical military attention, feet at a 45-degree angle, your hands to your side with your index finger on the seam of your pants, looking forward, not saying a word. My dad looked at us all intently before saying that we were lucky that we weren't in jail, we're lucky that we didn't kill somebody or ourselves. And the next thing he said, some people might find kind of cheesy or dramatic, but it was something that to my brothers and I was horrible, and it's still a horrible thing to hear from him. He said, "What do you think your grandfathers would do if they saw you?" I think they'd be ashamed as I was. It was horrible. I wanted to cry. It was a huge thing to say to us. So he looked at us and he said, "I've put your stories together, and I've decided what happened and who's to blame. But before I tell you what your punishment's going to be, I want you guys to know that it was horrible leadership to let your little brother run off like that." I was shocked. What? Let your little brother run off? What was happening? I didn't know what was going on. So after that point, I knew that if my brothers said that it was them, the punishment would be horrible. It would be a lot more than just cleaning up a mess. So I bit the bullet. I put my teeth on that bullet and bit hard. I said that I had run off, that I had seen the cave, and the idea of a giant lizard dragon took over my better judgment, that I had climbed up there and couldn't get down, and that they were on their way up there to get me when the giant landslide happened. And next thing I know, it's 6 a.m. the next day, and I'm at the foot of that dreaded cave, shoveling dirt and moving rocks with my dad. It was really cloudy that day. You could tell it was going to rain at any moment. We were there all day, and we were shoveling rocks and moving dirt and moving the trees that had fallen over, and we had this huge truck, and I had no idea where this giant truck came from. I remember it was so weird that I was in some weird truck with my dad, but later found out that it was his friend, Officer Jim's truck. So after shoveling dirt all day and moving rocks all day, my dad, my Officer Jim, came down, and him and my dad started talking, and finally Officer Jim asked him, "Did you find out what happened?" And Dad's like, "Yes, sir, I found out what happened." And I was really excited now, because I was finally going to know what my brothers had really told him, because I did not know what had really happened upstairs, or as my dad was calling him, upstairs. So I was trying really hard to shovel and listen at the same time, which I'm horrible at multitasking, so it was kind of difficult, but I was really shocked. He didn't tell him that I had run off, or that I had caused this huge mess